All right, looks like it's noon. We're kind of still got quite a few others that are still joining in, but we want to respect everybody's time and go ahead and get things started here promptly. Um, First of all, I just want to welcome everybody to Coven Bridge Group's presentation on the investigator's perspective of COVID-19. We are not here, of course, today to discuss how to wash our hands or to keep socially distanced. I think we've all seen enough of that in the news today. We are going to be talking about the surge in claims and how to protect yourself by doing your due diligence and investigating these claims and what measures you can take. So we will be focusing today on understanding the effects of COVID-19, increasing the awareness in claims, understanding those fraud opportunities that will arise, and the investigative measures to take. Now, to provide you guys with a little bit of a timeline, on December 31st, 2019, the World Health Organization was informed of an outbreak of a pneumonia of unknown cause. It was in January 29th this year that the US began its coronavirus task force. On March 11th, the World Health Organization characterized COVID-19 as a pandemic. Now, it was at this time that the US began to take those additional social measures to prevent the spread. Now, a map as recent as this morning, here in the US, we have just over 1.3 million cases in the US, along with 84,000 deaths. Now, for many Americans, the stomach churning market drops and growing recession triggered by the global spread of the coronavirus, they're reliving the memories of the financial crisis and Great Recession from 2008. I'm sure many of you that have worked claims during that 2008 to 2010 crash, you may have remembered there was a rise in fraudulent claims. As we have seen during previous economic fallouts, insurance fraud scams are implemented in new and creative ways. So what does this mean for you? Well, we're going to see on the next section the various types of claims that can arise out of the economic impact and a direct cause of COVID-19. Now, prior to the pandemic, the Coalition Against Insurance Fraud said that 57% of insurers predict an increase in personal property fraud by policyholders. Around 58% say the same for personal auto insurance. 69% expect a rise in workers' compensation scams, and 61% predict an increase in auto insurance fraud by organized rings. Now remember, this is all prior to the pandemic, which does not take into consideration that these numbers will be higher. Now, fraud fighters are going to need to gear up for the surge in insurance scams. You know, the new norm of business shutdowns, dwindling personal savings, the free-falling economy may have caused decent Americans to cheat the insurer for a fast cash infusion. You know, insurance fraud is often looked at as a victimless crime. You know, they justify this through getting a return on the money that has already been paid on their premiums. Now, as employees across our nation have felt the brunt of our current restrictions, employers have also opened up new opportunities for liability. Employees who previously commuted to a workplace are now working remote in several industries. I'm sure some of you are at home right now. You know, the questions of liability, coverage, and safeguarding have all become apparent due to this new work practice. You know, if a remote employee is injured in a home office, several questions can arise, which we will discuss. Employees currently on workers' comp do not feel a need to return. They begin to relax and engage in other activities. Also, you'll have employers and workers who would otherwise not drive for work are now actively engaged in deliveries and mobile work. You also have where employees will see a rise in COVID-19 work comp claims, as well as business interruption claims due to civil authority. Now, with the initial recorded statement, it is crucial in gathering as much information as possible. You know, if not done traditionally through an in-person statement, using our Coven Connect secured video recording conference service can provide you the answers you need. This can also be accomplished with multiple parties. Some of the examples of the questions that you want to obtain would include, does the company have a telework or a telecommute agreement? This is often an agreement that is signed by both parties. Who owns the equipment that may be involved? You know, such as I had a home office. Was there a chair? Was there a desk that was involved? Is there a policy guide on the location of the workspace? Does it have to be behind a secure door, not in a common area of the home? Does the employee have set hours? Did the reported injury occur during these set hours? And can photos be provided? Or can the investigator access the property to obtain the photos or retrieve any evidence? So you can see through a proper investigation, answers can be developed to give you the tools necessary in handling these claims. Now, with employees safe at home, the comfort of their surroundings, they will carry on with their daily activities. We see more and more individuals are taking advantage of the nice weather, going for walks, exercising, performing home and yard maintenance work while maintaining social distancing. As you know, we all get a bit stir crazy and want to get outdoors. Since we are an essential business, we do continue to operate in all 50 states, and our case managers also monitor the states closely on which ones are slowly opening back up. Well, here we have an employee who's reporting a shoulder injury. This video here was actually taken in late March as she was observed raking leaves. Now, this is just an example of what surveillance can provide for those who fake a claim to avoid either a layoff or also unwillingness to continue job functions. Even those who were on workers' comp prior to the pandemic no longer feel a need to report their recovery, as they may think that they do not have a job to return to. Now, with social distancing, people want to stay connected, and a great resource for this is social media investigations. Some of the things that you can develop through social media is exercise posts, financial stress that they may be reporting on, also items for sale that maybe later turned out to be listed as a stolen item, planned events, as well as their general attitude. Now, financial stress could also compel more businesses to lowball their payroll and staff size. You have permanent and part-time layoffs, regrettably will increase. This is going to be possibly for months to come. Falsifying these layoffs, this would seem more plausible to workers' comp insurers amid this turmoil. And it also is then easier to disguise and get away with. What you'll also find is that there will be a reclassification of employees' job duties and the type of work the company conducts. This is another way of reducing that premium. You'll have things such as like high-rise window washers will become maintenance workers, tree trimmers become gardeners or landscapers. Also, with delivery drivers are classified as servers. You'll also have auto claim related to businesses. As more and more businesses are now delivering due to dine-in and storefronts being closed, there is a rise in work comp auto related claims. Some of the questions we want to make sure that we're answering is, was a personal vehicle used? If so, what kind of insurance do they have? Is there business coverage? Is there business coverage by the employer or the personal vehicle business coverage? Was the accident during the time of actual business or commute? Were they making a delivery or were they traveling to and from work? Are there safety measures and guides on safe driving that were provided? Also, was there any additional training that was provided? Now, measures also must be taken to investigate COVID-19 related claims and understanding their compensability. Although most states, the burden is on the employee to prove that it was cause arising out of or during employment, each state does have their own guidelines on occupational illness and disease and what is covered based on occupational type and exposure level. For example, in recent changes in California, they've changed placing the burden on the actual employer, and they have limited the time frame in which a claims decision can be made. In business-to-business exposure, work comp carriers can also look to subrogate liability with the party that may be at fault, which could be from an exposure from another business. Now, timeliness is also important. Now, just as a reminder, don't forget, you guys can feel free to submit questions during this. If you have questions, there is a Q&A at the bottom. So feel free to use the Q&A box at the bottom. We will be able to answer questions afterwards. But as I said, the timeliness is important. We want to attempt to get the initial interview of the individual, their roles, their policies, the safeguards, from the individuals. Now, things that we want to do is make sure that we're interviewing all parties. Personal contact may not be a safe option. Thus, a Covenant Connect video interview may be needed. Documenting the timeline with the individuals the employee had contact with, locating the cause may help subrogate, as we've seen previously. Social media searches, this is a great tool to help establish other possibilities of how the individual may have contracted it. Also obtaining medical records for treatment and other known health issues that may or may not make the employee more susceptible to the virus. Now, we've also had previously like a case that where a nurse had reportedly contracted the virus. Being in the profession she is in, you would assume it came from work. But through a social media search, it also revealed that she had been in contact with other individuals and as she'd been trying to sell her vehicle and had been shopping for a new one. Now, with the mandated closure of non-essential businesses, interruptions in operations will force insured businesses to file claims. Utilization of an investigator may provide many benefits in verification of these claims. Understanding the state's emergency closure, the time frame of closure, along with the classification of essential and non-essential business is an important step. Background checks into the business type, as well as operations, conducting things such as like canvassing of the nearby businesses for validating of those operations, whether they're currently in operation or previously were in operation, as well as interviews of employees identified by the claimant business are all tools that we can use to verify these claims. Now, according to the NICB, we've already been monitoring additional fraud potential. Now, with remote and teledoc, especially as medical referrals begin to be handled through a more virtual resource outside normal office visits, you should continue to be on the lookout for claimants, physicians, and attorneys attempting to submit these fraudulent or exaggerated medical claims. With calls for telemedicine to be expanded rapidly, you can expect an equal rise in those seeking to commit these scams. And also this is all before adequate safeguards can be put in place. Now, as with fake whiplash claims, telemedicine can also exploit mass production of false claims. Ways to combat this could be like through record retrieval. Is there HIPAA qualification, licensing, and also inspection of equipment may help combat these fraudulent claims. Now, with Medicare and Medicaid, there's new opportunities that can arise for billing of unnecessary services. We have vitamin infusions with unproven results against COVID-19. There is now in-home testing, but it is questioned on its validity and is also something that's not yet approved by Medicare. New lab providers will also start to pop up with unsupported documentation and appropriate equipment. Conducting clinic inspections, medical review are some of the tools investigators can use to combat falsified claims. Now, as businesses will have reduced staff to accommodate the loss of revenue, post-termination claims become more common. An investigation plan to manage these will help reduce unnecessary benefit payment. This is what we need to be prepared to obtain employee records to include disciplinary issues or grievances, interviewing the employer and coworkers to include questions into their prior complaints of injury by the employee. Once again, this could be something that could be done either in person or through a virtual Covenant Connect interview. Identifying these injuries consistent with job functions from other previous claims may be filed by other coworkers. Now, if your first notification is from an attorney, that's also a red flag giveaway. Did the forms that were being provided appear to be in cookie cutter format? Are other claims handled by the same attorney reporting the same injuries? Social media, surveillance of the employee early on will also help mitigate this type of loss. Now, there is a possibility to see abuse and fraud using FMLA, social media, surveillance, also limited interviews, can also help identify the abuse or fraud. Now, the reason for saying limited interview here is that we must be careful not to ask questions that might be prohibitive, such as like medical inquiries. Within recent additions to the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, this is for paid leave by employers with under 500 employees, is another way fraud can occur. This is done through falsifying the reimbursement of payroll expenses, as well as leave not qualified under the program. Now, there is a difference in abuse and fraud. Abuse would most likely be produced with an excuse that is within coverage, but not necessarily the case. For example, abuse would be the day after the Super Bowl. That happens to be a high FMLA filing date. But fraud can occur when employee modifies certain forms, such as like a doctor's note, a diagnosis to extend their leave. And it is always recommended to get record retrieval directly from the source using a signed HIPAA release. Now, with long-term care and disability, we also have seen an increase in the insured activities, even with the current social restrictions in place. Now, there are some attendants that do remote check-ins with the insured and have the limited amount of time that they are actually there providing care. Now, conducting an unbiased surveillance with both the insured activity and attendant care have proven to be successful. Now, during the time of isolation and social distancing, this is an opportunity for fraud rings and criminal elements to increase their activities of staged accidents. These occur when someone or a group purposely causes an accident in order to make a claim against the insurance company. Now, with these organized auto schemes, they might put the word out that they're in business. Why not stage collisions with your unwanted late model SUV or another vehicle? Your vehicle gets totaled, it's giving you a nice income boost to fake an injury claim. Individual drivers and small business owners will also may look for a quick collision by collusion to cover their expenses or bills. Identifying a connection between friends, neighbors, and business associates may be hard to detect, but with the right investigation, this can uncover the scam. With no police reports and witnesses, and there happens to be a limited exchange of information during these times, it becomes more important to notice these red flags and investigate the claims. Now, if you have an immediate notification, have the investigation begin right away by locating the parties and getting statements. By having the investigator, secure statements of all parties right away will also help avoid collusion as well as representation. Medical records, phone records, this will also help refute or validate the loss. And although businesses are closed, cameras are still rolling. The video is captured everywhere. And obtaining copies of this video right away will help mitigate the claim. And just as a reminder for everybody that video records 72 hours to 30 days on average. So you can see the sense of urgency of making sure that you get copies of it before it's recorded over. Now, some repair shops might start charging for excess fees for disinfecting and storage of vehicles. These claims should be scrutinized and investigated. Making a visit to the repair shop, verifying the presence of cleaning solutions, as well as the option to verify or dispute these charges. We can also obtain best practice guides, training information for the employees who are doing the deep cleaning during the outbreak. You'll also see where there's an increased damage to vehicles at the shop that may occur. This is where it's important to always compare photos provided by the parties on site to those that are taken either at the shop or by a field adjuster. Shops will also offer to pay the deductible and by then increasing the actual covered bill. You also see aftermarket parts getting used also in place of original manufactured parts that were paid for. Another thing is also association, like how was the shop referred to will help detect if auto shops were involved with either the attorney or a medical practice. Now, during high economical times, many consumers have the spending money to buy luxury toys. These just happen to be some of the first items to go. You'll see fake thefts, sinking of boats, fires, and other mysterious losses that could swiftly rise. Sudden increases in policy limits by homeowners without the income, lifestyle, or possessions to support the coverage could be among those red flags. Primary and secondary homes may burn just days or weeks after a new policy limit takes effect, or just before a foreclosure is scheduled. Seeking these new scheduled item coverages, deductibles, coverage limits just before a claim should be scam giveaways. Now, homeowners may also look to turn to arson if mortgages become unpayable. You have frying grills, lit candles. These are among some of the standard policyholder excuses. You might also find that you'll have targeting torches of either garages, kitchens, or other small home areas that might offer an income boost without raising too much suspicion that burning the entire home might arouse. Things to look for here is also inflated cost of items and out of ordinary property that might be included that they don't have proof of ownership or supporting documentation, such as pictures. Now, with the current economic stress and less patronizing of businesses, you can also see how two of these three elements of arson are easily developed. With taking full statements, photos, fire marshal reports, cause and origin are important steps in proving fraud. With our experience, we find that it's important to try to get the first responders' accounts and reports prior to taking the insured claimant statements, as this will help identify any inconsistencies in their stories. Now, as you can see, we can continue to see many potential ways that claims will arise out of COVID-19. Having an understanding and empathy for situations, but we must still do our due diligence in investigating these claims. When word gets out that your company takes claims serious and properly investigates, fraudsters will take note. We still continue to see results through surveillance of existing and new claims. Interviews, whether they're in person or through a virtual interview such as Coven Connect. Virtual interview products are becoming popular, but many do include your P2 as well as personal health information. HIPAA compliance is an important part of that. Canvassing of scene investigations, social media, record retrieval. These are all tools necessary in investigating the claims. Now, with the virtual interview, as I mentioned, these products are not equal. HIPAA compliance should be mandatory, since without it, you're going to have a risk to the employer, the insured. Also, the claimant's personal identifying and health information is not protected if not HIPAA covered. Now, you can also visit us at covenbridge.com, and also with ordering assignments, you can also contact us at our 888 number, as well as assignments at covenbridge.com. You can also follow us on the various social media links listed here. Looks like we're getting a couple of questions that are coming in, and I do encourage everybody, we got a few minutes here. You're going to see a Q&A at the bottom of your screen, so feel free, utilize that Q&A. We'll be able to answer any of your questions. We still have a little bit of time left here that we can do that for.
Thank you, Jason. This is Stacy Hansen, I'm Chief Client Officer at Coven Bridge. Thank you all for joining us today. To address some of the questions that we have, on the first question, Jason, the question comes in and asks, isn't there privacy on phone records and how do you ask for them? I believe it's referring to slide 27 when you were talking about auto scams. Would you be able to clarify that?
Yeah, so you do have privacy on phone records. One of the things that comes up also is whether the phone is issued by an employee or an employer. If it's an employer provided phone, they're usually most likely to provide those records. That way they can see if the employee was on the phone, is it against their company policy or not. Also, you have on the phone, you can do geo-tracking, you can get speed, were they texting, were they talking. All of that is available through a digital forensics. As far as like obtaining records from on a privacy level, that is something that is also can be done through a court order.
Thank you, Jason. Also, we've had a question about, are we seeing a delay in obtaining medical records, even with an authorization during this COVID pandemic and the shelter in place and the closures? The answer is that we are seeing a little bit of a delay, mostly related to medical facilities that are closed and or have furloughed the employees that would normally handle those requests. We are successful in obtaining those records, but we are seeing some turnaround time delay in obtaining those records. Another question for you, Jason, do you anticipate an increase in commercial property arson since there's questionable coverage for COVID-related business interruption coverage?
I would say yes. You know, we're already seeing this, and it's two different ones with the arson claims. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, that two of the three elements of arson, you've got motive, you have opportunity, and whether it's incendiary or not. Those are the three. Motive and opportunity are relatively, during this time, can be discovered pretty easy, especially with interruption. And as far as the business interruption coverage, a lot of that also has to do with whether it was civil authority, which in most cases is involved. If the civil authority, is that business even classified as an essential or not? Is it was allowed to be remained open, or was it actually closed? And part of that is also investigating the history of the business prior to the pandemic, and understanding that timeline and that particular state's or local authorities' timeline of when closures went in place.
I would add to that, as well as, since we are expecting an increase in business interruption claims that may or may not be covered in addition to civil authority, Covered Bridge is releasing probably early next week a product around investigations for those claims. So look for that next week. Also, the next question is, what options are available for surveillance due to stay-at-home order? I'll take that one. And right now, Covered Bridge is deemed an essential business. So we have armed our staff with documentation. So if they are challenged, and we've had no issues in any state or jurisdiction. We've also done an analysis of the videotape documentation obtained during this period of time last year when there was no pandemic to now. And we are seeing the same level of videotape documentation being obtained at this time. However, we are seeing an increase in impact video. So the video that is deemed contradictory to the claimant's alleged injury is increased during the pandemic. And also we're seeing, and that does not relate to any survival activities like shopping at the grocery store or pharmacy runs, anything like that. This is specific to home improvements, lawn work, kayaking, boating, running, a variety of different things that we're seeing at this time. The next question is, and Jason, you'll take this, do you anticipate an increase in the need for experts?
Yeah, I would say that, especially on the arson claims, having a cause and origin, that's an important step. I mean, a lot of times you'll have the fire marshal's reports. Getting those ahead of time is an important part of that. Structural engineers, as well as accounting, being able to decipher business records is another important step. Having an accounting expert look at that business interruption insurance.
Exactly, and as part of the business interruption investigation recommendations we're going to be putting out next week, it is going to include a recommendation of forensic accounting, partnering with your forensic accounting in order to investigate those claims. The next question is related to access to this video, and we are going to be posting it no later than tomorrow to our YouTube channel, and we will also be sending out a link to all registered attendees that you may share with anyone on your team or outside of your team. Jason, I don't have any additional questions.
I see one more that I just want to make sure
Oh,
that
sorry.
did get addressed on the business interruptions. If it's not clearly involving a pandemic, you know, how do you address business interruption claims when the policy isn't clearly involving the pandemic? And that's where it's important understanding those individual states, as well as counties or municipalities, of the timeline of events, and that being investigated as well, because it's going to determine whether it's pandemic related or not. If there was a closure, was it considered essential, non-essential on that business interruption?
Thank you, Jason. We want to be respectful of everybody's time. We had held it till 12:30, so I want to, in closing, thank you all for attending this presentation. We hope you found it to be a valuable use of your time. As stated, I will release the link to everyone who had registered for this presentation and last week's presentation, and we will post it on our YouTube channel, Coven Bridge's YouTube channel, no later than tomorrow. Thank you again, and have a great day. Be safe out there.
Thank you.